Hi guys, we're on chapter 5, gender, and here we need to clarify the difference here. So gender refers to the social categories of male or female, while sex refers to the biological status of being male or female. In traditional cultures, what we need to go over is from girl to woman. So girls typically work alongside their mothers from an early age. Girls typically maintain a close relationship with their mothers. During adolescence, the world contracts for girls. Girls endure new restrictions that are observed for the women of the society. Girls have, and we've talked about this before, broad versus narrow socialization. So, with the girls in traditional cultures, they have narrow socialization at adolescence because their budding sexuality is more likely to be tightly restricted. There are cultures where they try to hide the girls that are hitting puberty or hide that they are hitting puberty for fear of being kidnapped, put into sex slavery, things like that. Now, for boys to becoming men, boys typically have less contact with their families and more contact with their peers. During adolescence, the world will expand for the boys. They enjoy new privileges that are reserved for the men. For boys, manhood is something that has to be achieved. A lot of times, for boys to achieve manhood, the attainment of manhood is often fraught with peril and carries a definite and formidable possibility of failure. In most cultures, adolescent boys must demonstrate three capacities before they can be considered a man. They need to be able to provide, so show skills that are economically useful. They need to protect, show they can contribute to protecting their family. And procreate, must gain some degree of sexual experience before marriage. It's interesting here. There are forms of passage or rites of passage here for boys to become men. In some cultures, they'll send the boys out into the wilderness, and if they last a certain amount of time, then they're considered, and return, they're considered men. It's interesting. In some cultures, they'll have. There is one culture where individuals will jump from this large platform that was made by the tribe, for instance, attached by vines, and they go head first into the ground. If they hit their head and they survive, they're considered men. If they do not, well, then they die. So it's interesting to see how that some cultures do. They show their how they become men. So it's interesting. Now, gender and globalization in developing countries, the adolescent girls have much more less of a way of educational and occupational opportunities here. Economic development can level the gender role playing field, but in a lot of cultures, women are still restricted. Now, girls in American history, there are four areas where lives of the adolescent girls are narrowly constricted: occupational choice, intellectual work, sexuality, and physical appearance. It's interesting how over time, now you have to remember back in the day, women would be raised or girls would be raised to make sure they take care of their family, and their job was to stay home. That not is not that's not how it is now. Now, there's still issues with women getting paid the same as men, things like that, but women do have a much more wider opportunities in life now compared to, say, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now, in your text, you'll see something from Rotundo in 1993, the three manhood transformation. You have three types here. You have the communal manhood, which we saw in the 17th, 18th century. The focus was on gender expectations for adolescent boys, was on preparing to assume adult role responsibilities in work and marriage. Self-made manhood, 19th century, males were increasingly expected to become independent from their family in adolescence and emerging adulthood. And the passionate manhood we see in the 20th century. Passionate emotions such as anger and sexual desire become regarded more favorably as part of the manhood ideal. Doesn't make it right, but that's the way the passionate manhood in the 20th century was seen. Now, it's interesting, even at home when you were raised, now I was raised much earlier than you guys were, I assume. And it's interesting, like even the jobs that we had or chores we had were considered typical male and female. My sister was raised and my mother taught her how to cook, clean, things like that. While our jobs were like because I have three, or excuse me, I am one of three male siblings in the house. We were raised to do the trash, cut the lawn, shovel the snow. It's interesting how we get these stereotypical jobs. Now, that has changed over time, but it's interesting how you're actually socialized within your own home, being male or female. Now, self-expression and self-enjoyment replace self-control and self-denial as the paramount virtues in the three-manhood transformation. So it's interesting how over time things have started to change. Gender intensification hypothesis. Psychological and behavioral differences between males and females become more pronounced at adolescence because of the intensified socialization pressures to conform to culturally prescribed roles. It's interesting, even when I went to school, if the males weren't playing with the males and the males decided to play with the females, people looked at them or made fun of them. And it's pretty interesting how you are socialized in the school systems even. The boys are supposed to play with the boys, girls are supposed to play with the girls. Gender intensification occurs especially for adolescents who are exposed to socialization pressures to conform to traditional gender roles. It's like boys play football, girls play with Barbie, things like that. Now, in family, peers, and schools, the differential gender socialization is where you're socializing boys and girls according to different expectations. It creates an understanding of appropriate behaviors for males and females. Differential socialization most often occurs or results from how parents and teachers were socialized. I always talk every semester about this commercial, this German commercial actually, that showed a father coming home and seeing his son playing with Barbies, and he's so frustrated he gets mad. The second time he sees it, he buys him a G.I. Joe. And the G.I. Joe, the son really doesn't want, but he plays with him anyway. But eventually, the end of the commercial that shows the son playing with the Barbies again, and shows what's going on in the kid's head, and it's basically showing G.I. Joe tied up while he is hanging out with the three girls. So in his mind, those Barbies were real people, and it's interesting how we view things, especially as parents. Is that right or wrong? It's like the question I will always ask in my class. How would you feel if you saw your kids playing with your sons playing with a Barbie doll? A lot of people throughout the semesters, things have improved in the way people respond to it, but a lot of times people will have issues with it because they feel, it may affect their sexual identity or sexual orientation, whatever. And it's interesting, an experiment was done where in a lab where they brought boys and girls into a lab where they had girl toys on one side, boy toys on the other. And majority of even the boys kind of went towards the girl toys. And there's a reason for that. Male toys kind of are not boring, but the colors are boring. Girl toys are a lot shinier. They go for novelty. So kids will go towards novelty. And it's normal. It doesn't affect their development. It's a normal thing. Matter of fact, parents can affect the development of their children by making it more of a big deal than it is. It's not a problem. They will be attracted. Barbie dolls are shiny, things like that. So the colors are brighter. So in turn, most of the kids would go towards the female toys due to that fact. Differential gender socialization reflects a cultural belief about gender. Parents and teachers may do this without even thinking consciously about what they are doing, but affecting how genders are socialized. So it's pretty interesting. Going on to female and male things, magazines, for instance. Magazines are more than any other medium display the most obvious focus on gender socialization, especially for adolescent girls. Physical appearance is stressed as being an ultimate importance. Also, there's an intense focus on how to appeal to boys. So we're raising our children reading these magazines, even the teen magazines a lot of times, to basically say this is what you're supposed to do. Times are starting to change, and now males and females can do whatever they want. Problem is that it's taken a long time to get here. So differential socialization is based on your experience. Like, for instance, think of examples of differential gender socialization in your childhood, in your adolescence, and emerging adulthood. In which period do you think the differences was most pronounced? Put that answer in the discussion, please, or the chat. I would like to see what you guys think, because I feel it's important that students have a say or get to voice what they feel. A lot of times, students don't get that opportunity, and especially now that we're doing the online courses, it makes it more difficult for you guys to express what you feel. So please put it in the discussion or into the chat section on Canvas. Now, cognitive developmental theory of gender. Gender is a fundamental way of organizing ideas around the world. Or excuse me, about the world, I should say. It kind of ties in with the idea of like what in your mind feels is a male job or a female job. It's interesting. Construction is a perfect example. It's predominantly a male field. But even in this area, I have a friend that owns a construction company, and she has been running it for a very long time. They actually had to do with the rebar for the stadiums in Philadelphia, and they're doing a lot of these 95 jobs that are going on at this point. But it's a female-run company, and her top foreman is female. So times are starting to change, which is good. Now, masculinity, femininity, and androgyny. There is the BEM sex role inventory. It describes traits regarded by most members of the American majority culture as being masculine or feminine. Most widely used measure of gender role perception. So you'll see it in your text. There was a cross-national study of young people in 30 countries found similar gender role perceptions with remarkable consistency. So basically, they list a bunch of traits, and people determine whether it is seen as masculine or feminine. I'll give you some examples, like self-reliant. In the study, it was seen as a masculine trait. Compassionate was seen as a feminine trait. Shy was considered a feminine trait in the study. Analytical, masculine. Dominant, masculine. Ambitious, masculine. Loyal, feminine. Understanding, feminine. Assertive, masculine. Cheerful, feminine. I'm curious what you guys feel. I'm curious to see if you feel these traits are masculine, feminine. So write your answers down too on the chat or discussion. Some other ones: affectionate, seen as feminine. Independent, seen as masculine. Aggressive, seen as masculine. Now, these are all based on this inventory done and the study being done. Sympathetic, seen as feminine. Athletic, seen as masculine. Childlike, seen as feminine. Tender, seen as feminine. Individualistic, masculine. Competitive, masculine. Gullible, feminine. These are all traits that were seen in this study as either masculine or feminine. Now, androgyny. Now, I don't know if any of you watched Saturday Night Live back in the day, but there was a character called, or a skit called That's Just Pat. And she was the individual was an androgynous individual. If you know the character who played that, the person who played that character, she was feminine, or female, but it was interesting because nobody actually knew, so that's what made that skit funny. Anyway, androgyny is a term used for the combination of masculine and feminine traits in one person. Advocates of androgyny have argued that being androgynous is better than being either masculine or feminine because an androgynous person has a greater repertoire of traits to draw on in their daily lives. Advocates point to research that showed androgynous children are more flexible and creative than other children. That was done by Hemmer and Kleber in 1981. You'll see that listed in your text. Androgynous women are better at saying no to unreasonable requests. You'll see that in the study by Kelly et al. In 1981 also. Now, gender roles in American minority groups. African American women, for instance. Female roles contains a variety of characteristics that reflect the difficult challenges that Black women have faced historically, which include self-reliance, assertiveness, perseverance, So black adolescent girls tend to have higher self-esteem and are less concerned with physical appearance than white girls. African American men have been frequently subject to insults to their manhood, from statuses of property during slavery to being denigrated as boys no matter what their age. It's interesting because right now during our society, what's going on now, you're seeing a lot of these issues coming out and how black men are being treated in our society. It's pretty sad. Now, economic conditions in many American cities make it difficult for black men to fill the traditional provider aspect of the male role. As a consequence of these humiliations, according to some scholars, many young black men adopt extreme characteristics of the male role in order to declare their masculinity in spite of the discrimination they're experiencing. Latino women. Gender roles have been highly traditional until recently, much along the lines of the traditional cultures. The role of women was concentrated on caring for children, taking care of the home, and providing emotional support for their husband. Women have been taught to emulate the Virgin Mary by being submissive and self-denying. Things are starting to change or have been changing, so that's a positive. Latino men, the role of these men have been guided by the ideology of machismo, which emphasizes male dominance over females. Men are expected to be undisputed heads of the household and to demand respect and obedience from the wives and children. The traditional aspect of manhood is strong among Latinos to provide for a family, protect the family from harm, and procreate a large family. Now, I was talking earlier about stereotypes, so let's talk about gender stereotypes in emerging adulthood. Stereotypes occur when people believe others possess certain characteristics simply as a result of being a member of a particular group. It's interesting, stereotypes like I'm Irish, and the stereotype is Irish are alcoholics. Not necessarily true, just a gender stereotype. You probably all know different stereotypes either within your own culture or others. So these stereotypes kind of limit people, or they perceive things in the wrong way. Let's put it that way. Gender stereotypes attribute certain characteristics to others simply on the basis of whether they are male or female. Like an example, boys love trucks, girls are shy. Not necessarily the truth, okay? Now, persistence of beliefs about gender differences, even when there is statistically significant differences between males and females, for most characteristics, there is nevertheless more similarities than differences between genders. Most human characteristics will fall into a normal distribution, where a small portion of people rate much higher, a small proportion rate much lower, but most people fall somewhere in the middle. Now, these persistence of gender differences, gender schemas tend to shape the way we notice, interpret, and remember information according to our expectations about gender, or about genders, I should say. Social roles for males and females enhance or suppress different capabilities. This is the social roles theory. Differential gender socialization leads males and females to develop different skills and attitudes, which leads to different behaviors. The differences in behavior seem to confirm the appropriateness of the different roles. Now, gender and globalization, adolescent girls today have opportunities that were unknown to women in previous eras of Western history. And globalization is also improving in traditional cultures, the gender roles. The proportion of females in fields such as medicine, business, and law are considerably higher than 20 years ago. However, like I said to you earlier in this lecture, women still tend to earn less money than men, even when they are doing similar work. Not right. Women that can do the same job as a man and should be paid the same amount. Gender equality still has a long way to go. In countries outside the West, adolescent girls have much less in the way of educational and occupational opportunities, so that is an issue. In most developing countries, adolescent girls are considerably less likely than boys to go to a traditional school. As traditional cultures proceed towards economic development, they may offer more opportunities for girls. As economies become more developed and complex, brain matters more than brawn, and men's physical advantage ceases to matter in work. Women may have more opportunities for different gender roles as time goes by. Okay, so that is Gender, Chapter 5. Any questions, feel free to send me an email or send it over on a chat or discussion board on Canvas. Look for the next lecture in Chapter 6, okay? Thank you so much, and have a good day. See you in the next chapter.